right, well, everyone, welcome to the Shorter Artist Hour, where I talk to my superbly talented friends that I think the world needs to know more about. And we might not talk for a full hour, but that's okay because it's the Shorter Artist Hour because I'm Susan Shorter. And today I'm super excited to share with you a chat with a couple of my friends here that are both highly acclaimed professional artists and the co-hosts for the Hanging Out podcast. We have Bruce Brenneise, is that right?
Correct. Yep, you
Yes,
got it.
yes, and Alan Morris. So, yay!
Woohoo!
Thank you guys for coming.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Highly acclaimed. I'm going to
Highly.
use that now. Someone said it about me, so I'm going to get a shirt printed and everything.
Yeah, well,
Right.
you can quote me on that on your website there.
Yes, yes.
It's going to go, yeah, on the portfolio. Highly acclaimed artist.
Heck yeah. Well, to start off, how did you guys even meet?
Bruce was stalking me for years.
Oh, that's sweet.
Technically, we met on Smart School
Yeah,
first, right?
kind of. We were around, but I don't think we ever, because I audited one of your classes, I think.
Okay, yeah. I was taking the Donato class. Was that the one that you
Mhm.
audited, or was it the Dan Dos Santos class?
Oh, it might have been the Dan one,
Yeah.
because I audited two.
But we
That means
first met at a Crab Jab opening. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Susan, but Crab Jab used to be this gallery in Seattle that had a lot of imaginative realism and sci-fi fantasy related shows. And unfortunately, they're not doing that anymore. But that is where Alan and I first ran into each other. I think he and Todd had come up for an opening, if I remember right.
Yeah,
And
right. So, yeah, that was the first time we had actually met. And it was one of those things where I sort of knew you already. I don't know why I recognized you,
Oh, I
but I
recognized
did.
you. Yeah, yeah, from like Facebook or whatever,
And
because I think we were Facebook friends at that point.
and I didn't know anyone else there. Uh and so yeah. And then you started popping up at every single thing that I went to. Like, I don't remember. There were like three things because the next one was like right at Norwestcon.
Sure.
We hung out there, and then I can't remember what the other things were, but
Might
you
have
were
been
just
like Emerald City, Norwestcon, and who knows what else. My strategy at that point in my career was to be very omnipresent and go to absolutely every industry related thing that I could get my hands on. So, that's entirely fair to say I was popping up
yeah.
everywhere.
So it became an inside joke that he was stalking me, even though we were both, up and comers who would both argue, want to be at Spectrum Art Live, right? But
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
no.
Well, that's fantastic. How did then that friendship evolve into the podcast that you guys do now?
Hmm.
I used to have a podcast that I probably used my single tickets to interview some very large name artists. And then my co-host for that stopped wanting to do it. It was also called Hanging Out Podcast, and I wanted to get it back going simply because I missed having conversations with artists and not being locked in my goblin cave all the time because at shows you you don't really get that much time to sit and talk to people. You're running back and forth to your booth, and so I asked Bruce to join in because I feel like have he's a pretty insightful person to begin with, and we have a good repertoire. But I think that having two people or a co-host to help me interview was great, and it's worked out pretty
Yeah.
well.
Well, I definitely have questions about each individual's art career and all that good stuff. But while we're on the podcasting, I might as well keep going down that
Sure.
line. Do you feel that you guys doing that, does it take away from your creative time, or do you feel like it's more beneficial because it fuels that inspiration, lets you have those conversations, and it's getting your name and face out there, maybe in front of people that might not have already known your stuff.
Yeah, it's like an hour or two a month, so that's really not much time taken out from the overall schedule.
Yeah. So you just do it monthly? Do you guys like have a regimented schedule or just
At first, I was only doing a one-off, the one we did with Ashley Renee Cassidy because I wanted to Cassidy, I think, and then I enjoyed it so much. I had other questions for other people. We were doing it something like once every other week for like a month, and then we were both like, nah,
It's a little
no,
much.
yeah, it's a yeah. So we because I don't want to, I edit all of them, so I don't want to do that.
Right.
And I asked Bruce one day, I was like, "Do you want to edit them?" And he said, "Absolutely not." So we're doing this at once a month now.
Video stuff is not my forte. Yeah, I technically have some knowledge and skills along those lines, but
Well, how do you go about choosing who you want to interview? There's so many talented people out there.
this is a very good question. It's at this point, it's kind of random. It's often based on who we run into at shows.
Yeah.
Also, we did put out a call at one point saying, "Hey, anyone who wants to be on," and you were the one of the ones who responded to that. So that's how we ended up interviewing you, and now you us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
usually it's just something one of us or both of us wants to know more about an aspect of an artist's, convention setup or their career.
Yeah.
Or even, what was it with Ron Sanders had so many interesting questions about conventions, and he was coming over from fine art, and that's such an excellent conversation.
Yeah, at least two of our recent interviewees literally came out of people that we were meeting or hanging out with at Dragon Con. So I think oftentimes that's kind of how it goes, is it like, at the convention, we don't have time to really dig into all of the things,
Mhm.
or we're digging into some interesting things and we think other people might also want to know about them. And so it's like, okay, the podcast is almost like an extension of whatever conversations we happened to have at the con.
For sure. And that just makes me think of one of the next guests I want to have as soon as he's so insanely busy. Was next to me at Indiana Comic Con, which I'm sorry, Alan, I kept trying to get over to see you because I knew you were there and I wanted to say hey, but I just didn't have a pocket. Well, besides writing Falcor, I had to do that. But anyway, so my neighbor at Indiana Comic Con was Steve Garcia, and he was just this really cool guy. We got along great. Turns out he was an animator on The Simpsons, and he also
Oh, wow.
animated Iron Giant and like I think Rugrats or something like that. But he's done all these things that I grew up loving. So I'm like, yeah, I have to have him on and see what's that like to be an animator on The Simpsons. That's insane.
I've met him. He is really, really nice. He probably doesn't remember me, but
Well, we're bonded in another way too, because oh God. On the way to Geek Meet Indy, I got pulled over, so I took a little selfie of me with the cop car behind me. And then on the way to Indiana Comic Con, my friend Tashina, who she calls herself my familiar, she helps me and all that kind of stuff. She got pulled over and took that same selfie. And so then Steve got pulled over on the way to Planet Comic Con and he did the same thing. So now we have this chain of these just embarrassing cop selfies. Anyway, but speaking of just random things you want to find out about your friends and the people that you meet, I don't know if it was in an interview or if you told me, Bruce, that you moved to China after college.
Yeah, correct. I was there for 6 years actually.
How did
Um,
that work? Did you have a job lined up out there or yes? Go.
So basically, after college, I did, graduate from art school and all that, and I, tried for a little bit to see if I could make anything happen, like make that jump to this kind of career that I'm doing now, and I wasn't seeing any leads panning out. I didn't like I think like a lot of artists starting out, like you're like, man, my art's good, and why is no one answering any of my emails? And it was very mystifying, and there weren't resources like Muddy Colors and stuff out there at that point to set me on the right path. So I'm like, well, if I can't do this thing, then I've got other itches that I can scratch, basically. So I lined up a job the first time I headed out to China, just with like an English teaching gig. And at that time, at least, it was incredibly easy. Basically, anyone coming from one of the main five English-speaking countries who has a college degree could immediately land a job teaching English over in China.
Amazing.
Super, super easy. So I did that for 6 months and then traveled for 4 months on my own all around China. Came back unannounced for Christmas and then went back over without a job lined up the second time and landed a teaching manager position at another school. And then I met my wife and in that next year, and then basically stayed there for quite a while.
Mm.
Um, while I traveled around and taught at universities for the most part, because I kind of got tired of teaching kids,
Yeah.
the ball is red, like not very interesting subject matter. I'd rather teach business English or, something of that nature to college students. That's at least something that I can dig into a little bit. But, after that amount of time, I was like, okay, I'm starting to see these resources popping up. I think Muddy Colors was like in
Mm.
2010 or 2011, sometime around then. So I came back to the States in 2012 and started to get my art career rolling.
So, do you speak fluent Chinese, or did you when you went over there?
我会说一点点, which is to say I speak a little, but I've been back in the States for 12 years. I was actually just over there for a month, hanging out with my in-laws, but I will say my Chinese is a bit rusty at this point, and um, I think even at its best, I would call it very advanced survival Chinese in the sense that I can get around and get the things that I need and want. But holding a conversation covering more than the basics is a little beyond me.
Do you feel that living over there really had an influence on your artwork?
Oh, huge. I mean, I was traveling all around. I was seeing all kinds of crazy landscapes and taking lots of reference photos, very much enjoying the national parks and, quite a few of my pieces have some specific reference or inspiration that jumped off from things that I saw there and in other countries that I traveled to nearby.
That's amazing. Two of my favorite pieces of yours. One, I just want to say you have an amazing use of color. I just absolutely love your color palettes are just
Thank you.
decadent. But two pieces of yours that I especially love is there's one that looks like the man is dissolving while he's reaching up into the sky.
Mm.
And the other, it looks like he's possibly reflecting on mortality or something standing on the face bridge. Are
He
those,
he's got the Hamlet pose where he's
yeah.
holding his skull in his hand too.
The
Yes.
the
So
one
are
behind
those
you.
client pieces or are those personal? Because they feel
Oh
personal.
yeah, one of them is right behind me. That's
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
Those are personal pieces, and I would agree. I think those are probably two of my very best pieces. Those were just part of a series that I did, which was reimagining Frankenstein's monster in the post-apocalypse, and sort of kind of bridging this project that I fell into with some other artists in the community. At one point, we wanted to do a Kickstarter for like a group um, sort of uh, illustrated book, and it was all us reimagining these Victorian monsters. So there were people doing Dracula and Frankenstein and so on. And that project, like many others of its type, fell apart,
Aw.
but I kept at it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this thing. So I think myself and maybe one or two other people out of that actually finished out our quota of expected pieces that we had wanted to make for it.
Yeah,
And the result was great. It was some of my best pieces.
that's awesome. I wish they would finish that book. That sounds so cool.
Oh, that thing's long dead, unfortunately. But like I said, it was kind of bridging over to my personal project, which is called The 12 Continents and is a post-apocalyptic, far future, weird world after everything that we know has disappeared and pure humans have left for the stars and all the rest of that. So there may be a different illustrated novel that comes out of this in the longer term.
Well, that would be cool. Well, I think I would get in trouble with my boss if I didn't ask. But one time when I was trying to figure out who I was going to use for a project. You ended up being too
Hmm.
busy anyway. But I showed him your work, and turns out he's a huge fan of Slay the Spire.
Oh,
And yeah, so that was super exciting for him. How did you end up doing work for them? Did they hunt you down, or did you just like send the cold email sort of thing with a portfolio? How did that work out?
that was pure serendipity. So I was living in Seattle at the time, and I was looking. This was at the very beginning of my career when I didn't really have any kind of client roster to speak of. And I walked down the street one day to a indie game dev get sort of meetup, just like a normal meetup, like those things. And I was the only artist who showed up that day. Everyone else had their computers, and I had a sketch pad. And they were there with a very, very early prototype of the game with basically no art. So, they were seeing what people thought of their prototype, and I was like, "Well, are you sure you want my opinion? I don't even play this type of game. Like, I'm not really into TCGs or card-based games like this." And they're like, "Yeah, let's hear what you have to say." So I tested their game, and then I left them a business card because clearly they needed some art in that game if they were going to make it buyable at some point. And 6 months later, at another indie game dev get together, they spotted me and they're like, "Hey, Bruce, we are looking for artists at this point." So the rest is history.
Very cool. Well, and I see that you sell playmats and all that stuff, prints and
Hmm.
everything of that artwork.
Yeah.
And Alan, I know you've done a lot of work for big companies as well. Whenever you guys do that, is the print rights something that you absolutely make sure is in the contract, or a lot of times do these ADs just offer that as part of your compensation? How does
Kind of varies depending on the size of the company, I would say, because the larger ones, it's usually tend to have contracts set in stone, and I'd say, for something like Wizards of the Coast anyway, that typically what they're doing is a work for hire contract, but then they're licensing back some print rights to the artist. So we have those. For an indie game customer like Slay the Spire, I had a lot of power to negotiate that contract with them. They'd never published a game before or anything, so there was no clout involved there. I think I ended up turning down a percentage of proceeds for flat pay up front, but the one smart thing I did do was retain merchandising rights to the art that I did for the game.
It's fantastic. Yeah, that's one thing that I do as being an AD, well, and also being an illustrator, is that I make sure all my artists have the rights to sell
Yeah.
prints, merch, and all that kind of stuff. I think it helps sweeten the pot because you never know. Like you said, was
Exactly. Yeah.
going to take
This
off.
these were two guys who'd never published a game before, like no inclination that this game was going to do anything but disappear into the sea of indie games on Steam and never be seen again. But it was a huge hit, and so having something for the artist that they can benefit from that, and that's essentially our retirement plan right there, is to
Right.
do enough work over the years that we've got stuff that'll continue paying once we can't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always talking to artists about lifetime value. And, like if you do something and you can't keep the print rights for it, I mean, that's, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars you might be losing in the future there,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, that was one of my questions I was going to get to, is kind of like, what's the end game goal for you guys in this career and things like that, the passive income that might come from, yeah, being able to sell merch and prints and all that from those titles. I could totally see that playing into it. But
Well,
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say personal IP, like the one I was telling about, is kind of the long-term goal, because at the end of the day, you really can't rely on any of these, you know, clients to exist as they currently do, right? Like the form of their business could change, the ownership of the business could change, the amount they're paying to artists could change. Uh, you know, for all I know, next year WotC will be like, nope, we're not offering print rights, and we're not offering artist proofs or any of that anymore. So, if that changed, then maybe I wouldn't be working for them, and I wouldn't want to continue with that. So, the end goal is to rely on myself in the long run.
Yeah, because there will come a day when we can't paint the way that we can right now.
Hmm.
And that's one question I have for both of you, because you both work primarily digital. Is there anything that you do to try to maintain your eye health and the health of your body working in front of the screen so much?
I
There's a
think my
lot of things I've tried. Go ahead, Chris.
go for it, Alan. I've been talking too much.
There's a lot of things I've tried over the years, like the blue light glasses or getting screen covers that kind of help things. Of course, that didn't work out because it changes the colors.
Yeah.
There's that rule where you look away every, what is it, 6 minutes or 12 minutes or something like that.
20 rule, 20 seconds
Yeah,
each, whatever.
yeah, 20 20 20. And I it I don't know. I've looked into this a lot, and even though it can strain the muscles themselves, I don't think it actually damages your retina in any way, especially when you're working on a screen like I am. And if you, what kind of do you work on a Wacom?
Me? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so those types of screens, I forgot exactly what type of bulbs they use in those screens, but they explicitly don't harm your eyes as much.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, while we're talking about your work, Alan, your use of lighting, is it your light and your pieces are just gorgeous, and you should be very proud. Very talented man. Your work reads like oil paintings to me. So a lot of times I was amazed whenever I would look through your videos and see that it was actually digital. So did you study classical oil painting?
Yeah, for the first part of my career, I was an oil painter,
Okay.
and I fought against switching to digital for so long. And because at the time, original sales, especially in illustration, weren't really a thing. You're seeing it a lot now. It's like the magic secondary market. I talked to, one of my mentors, Todd Lockwood, about it. He basically told me he had all of his originals still, and the thing that did it for me was I had an art director one time. I was doing this cover image for an RPG book. And they decided when we got to the final that, oh, they didn't want the character to have a bow anymore. He should have a sword and change his pose. And they were willing to pay for it. And I was like, well, I'm not willing to do it. I'd have to like either repaint it completely or sand it off and redo
Hmm.
it. So finally started to learn digital because that was sort of the way art directors were used to talking to people at that point. And, you always want to be hireable.
Yeah.
Uh, Except I was really bad at it. If you could see some of my first digital work, it's probably not, I've probably deleted it all offline
Oh, no,
before.
I would love it and do a
But
side by side in the little video.
I might pull some up the eventually. But the only once I discovered the mixer brush, things really started to click for me
Hmm.
because I like to say I'm the world's worst digital painter. I mostly work on one layer, blending everything together. And then if I do a secondary layer, it's basically like a glazing layer, and then I dry it as in merge it all at once. So I still think my brain still works very much like when I worked in oils. I even built a palette for each painting that follows me around as I zoom in. And yeah.
Yeah, that very much is painterly. Your stuff is also really realistic. Do you take your own reference images? Do you buy ref packs, or how do you go about that?
I've never had a lot of luck with ref packs because I'm a lot of my paintings I calculate the poses very early, and so yeah, I take a lot of my own reference images. I have a lighting studio, lights that I can set up and have a mobile studio if I need to go somewhere or set up in a certain spot. Um, I take so much less reference these days. When I was first getting started, everything was referenced meticulously. If someone was wearing leather armor or something, I had to go out and find something that I could take a picture of in that lighting setup. But over time, you learn these sort of, I don't want to call them tricks, but like you learn these rules. Like this is how leather works, this is how metal works.
Yeah.
And so uh, unless I have the time to really sit down and focus on that, which is few and far between these days, I will mostly just take reference for the the anatomy elements that are showing. And then for things like clothes, I want to say like 90% of my clothes are you can get away with murder with clothes.
Yeah.
And nature, you can get away with murder. Bruce knows. That's why he's a landscape artist. No, nobody's gonna say your cliff looks wrong.
Right, right. It's definitely much more challenging to do a scene that's involving a lot of architecture, for example, than a scene that involves a lot of cliffs and mountains and forests, because those organic kinds of shapes, right, have a wide range in terms of, before you hit the uncanny valley, whereas human-made structures often have like very specific perspective and stuff that has to be adhered to. Otherwise, you're suddenly deep in the uncanny valley.
Yeah.
What do you think is your favorite thing to paint? Like what do you get lost in? Are you somebody that likes the details? Do you like the light reflecting off of metal? Do you like the foliage? What's your happy place in your work?
Grass and rocks. So if you give me this, it sounds so weird, and it took me so long to figure that out, especially if you look at my portfolio. The If you could just give me a painting that's nothing but overgrown ruins and
Nice.
grass, I would be so happy. That's why I paint statues now.
Think
True.
for me it's geology, geological features. So again, like, cliff faces, canyons, mountains, that kind of thing. That's definitely like happy place when I just get to do those. And, part of it is the fact that it gives a wider playground, right? Like I can sit there and I can modulate the forms, and that's informed by my knowledge of geological features and what should look correct, right? But I can play with it. I can mold it. It's almost like I'm molding clay in my mind as I'm shaping these cliff faces or whatnot.
That's awesome. Well, since you guys do work primarily digitally, do you still paint or draw or anything at home? Do you keep sketchbooks?
I'm actually transitioning to mostly traditional at the moment, strangely enough.
Nice.
So I was an early adopter for digital. So it's almost like the opposite of what Alan's gone through. Back in college days, I was one of the first people, at least in my cohort, to really jump on the digital train and had been doing that for like some 20 odd years. And then recently, as I've started to do a lot of work for D&D and Magic, the fact that there is a strong collector community encouraged me to take the extra time to start jumping back into traditional. So actually, like for example, the last five or so paintings that I did for D&D recently, it was all a bunch of acrylic paintings. I took them with me to China and was working on them in the apartment in the afternoons, and I'm really enjoying it. So I'm actually going back to trying to do more and more of that.
Do you think you might try to do the main show at IX when you get enough of them?
Possibly someday. I think we're a ways from me feeling like I have that level of facility with my traditional work. Oftentimes it still needs like a final layer of cleanup and touch up and glow up, I suppose, digitally before I'm really ready to hand it over to the art directors at this point. But I'm working towards that goal of just being able to turn in a piece that I only need to adjust so that it looks more like the piece looks in person.
Yeah. Alan, are you still doing traditional?
I do portraits when people ask me a lot.
Yeah.
And I've still got all my digital, or sorry, my oil set up. But uh, as far as illustration work goes, I really can't match the level of detail that I want to put in my work because I have an issue with my eyes.
Oh,
And I've tried everything from jeweler's loops to, those larger things that they'll get for like the kind of glass they use for lighthouses, the ultra
Hmm.
zoom magnifiers.
Interesting.
And it gives me a disconnect I really can't do. But with my, like I said, my more organic work that I'm doing now that doesn't require so much detail, I'm thinking I'm going to get back into that. So yeah.
Nice. Are you guys seeing any effects of the rise of AI affecting your careers at all?
Not directly, I would say. I sometimes feel like I caught the last train out of Dodge when it comes to that stuff. Like my career, based on the things that I've worked on and the kind of name I've been able to build up for myself, there's a little bit of insulation there. I think that at this point, like well-established artists are often having to hustle for work, whereas they might not have had to hustle too hard, in the years preceding, but they're still able to get work. I think where the biggest effect is really on artists who are still establishing themselves or just getting started. It's really hard to get your work out there and your name out there simply because of the flood of visual content that AI is creating and the effect that it's having on the bottom of the market, because it's a lot of those kind of
Yeah.
first, artists first clients kind of people who are also kind of not that professional maybe. And as much as we complain about working with those clients, they are often our first rung on the ladder, learning what we like and don't like about, clients so that we have a better understanding of how we need to operate with more professional clients. Um, so it's particularly tough on that ecosystem, right? That early part of the ecosystem.
Yeah, I agree completely. My answer was going to be that it made my life a little bit easier because I have less emails to respond to. I think a lot of those, Bruce sort of has maybe, well, you did the stuff for Slay the Spire, which has characters in it, and you've done character work, but like my entire first part of my career was character work. And so my name's still out there if somebody wants a character portrait or RPG work for their third party book. I don't get those emails anymore. I think that's a big reason why. I think AI has sort of
Hmm.
um, taken over for that. I get less emails from uh, self-publishers as well. I've noticed that. I don't mind it, but like Bruce said, I think it'll be a little bit more difficult for people in the future. I think we both also lucked out into careers, or at least right now, career paths that have a collector base, whether it's secondary magic
Hmm.
or for me, it's been the collector's books that I've been doing, where people really want that authentic feel to the work.
You've both have been, well, I don't want to use the word lucky because you've earned it. You're both very talented artists, but you've both been able to work for some really cool IPs and some cool companies. What was there like a certain job or a certain company that you were like, yes, I made it when you got that gig?
I mean, definitely Wizards of the Coast was the the one where it's like, okay, we're established now. I think if you look before the Wizards of the Coast stuff, though, it was getting to work on Numenera for me, Monty Cook Games. They're not as big a fish as Wizards of the Coast, of course, but the work that they were doing on Numenera is like a perfect fit for the type of stuff that I like to do best. And so landing them was definitely like a highlight. And of course, the work that I did for them directly led to being able to work for Wizards of the Coast, because that alien landscape stuff I was doing was precisely why D&D and Magic pulled me in.
Nice. It was a very valid stepping stone. How about you, Alan?
I don't know if I've made it to the dream client yet. I don't know if they exist anymore as I've grown older. Originally, and I'd still work for D&D for free, right? Which
Yeah.
is part of Wizards of the Coast. And I do work for Magic. I enjoy working for Magic, but it was never something that I played a ton of. And so D&D was like my whole life growing up. I'd still work for them for free, but
Don't say that,
the
Alan.
I'm gonna
Don't
say
say
it. I'm gonna
that.
say it.
Stop it.
I
Stop it.
do one for free. I just like just the chance to be associated. But no, so Uh, the Bulgarian was great for me because it sort of followed me my whole life. That's under Grimmock Press, getting to do that. Um, but yeah, I think my version of making it was about 2 weeks ago when Eric Fortune came up to my booth and told me how great my art was without ever having met me. That was that was a
He's a
pretty good
very
moment.
sweet guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. Are there any dream IPs that you guys would like to work on? A certain story series or, I don't know, do an Anthrax CD cover. Just is there any like dream projects out there that you'd like to get your hands on?
Probably whatever remains of Industrial Light and Magic would be a dream client.
I don't know. D
Okay,
and
that's
D and
fine.
D would be that.
Yeah, he already stated
Yep.
it.
Yep. If fantasy art hadn't worked out, do you think you would have tried your hand in another field of art, like comic book or children's book, or would you have just, taught art? What do you think might have been your path if this didn't work out?
Possibly scientific illustration in my case. That is actually what I studied at university. Um, I do enjoy a lot of aspects of that. Like, if I were painting murals of ecosystems or, biological art of animals or whatever, like that wouldn't be so bad. I always did have, a tendency to twist it towards the imaginative realism, even when it was, assignments in college. Like I think one time, my semester-ending series of pieces that I did was a series of cryptids around the world. So I was doing, an illustration for one cryptid for each continent, basically. So I was always looking for opportunities to turn it towards something more fantastical. Um,
Do you still have those?
I mean, it was digital work, so it's not like I have a drawing sitting around, but yeah, I think I probably have the files somewhere. At least a few of them.
Cool. Alan, what about you?
I probably would have gone into fine art, portraiture, and then fine art. I was on a fast track to that and teaching whenever illustration didn't pay the bills right out of the gate. I got out of college and my dream was always illustration. And like I said, it was going digital at that time. Everything sort of was, and I just couldn't compete in the early days. No one was willing to hire me. And so I was paying my bills with what I'd saved up from college and doing my first love, portraiture, on the side to get by. And I had been accepted to actually a master's program before I got into uh, started getting some work at a time. I got a large project right at the time school was supposed to start there. And I really wasn't totally prepared for that. And I said, okay, well, the ball's starting to roll. Let's see where this goes. And the rest is history. So
Nice. Well, you both, I assume, work from home, or do you have separate studios? Because I was just wondering when you work from home, and I have this struggle myself, how do you separate your personal life from your work life? Do you have, like how do you shut that off?
Yeah, I think we're both working from home.
yeah.
I've been in Alan's studio, so I know it's part of his home. Mine certainly is. For me, it's mostly about schedule. I am a night owl, so those quiet night hours are when I really get my best work done. The daytime, I do try and reserve more of myself for my family, when my son comes home and all the rest of that. So, it's mostly based on time for me.
I tend to hyper focus. So trying to juggle my home life with work life it isn't that much of a struggle. Uh, if anything, I think it tends to help me. When I used to go somewhere else and work, it like things would just start falling through the cracks, like, you didn't quite do the dishes or something like that, or the house isn't as clean as you like it. And now it gives me an opportunity, which I almost never had before, to stand up and take a break from my work in a meaningful way, while also feeling productive, since I'm obsessed with being productive. So,
I know, income for all of us. Part of it is doing conventions. Do you guys do a lot of conventions? And what ones do you find are more well receiving of fantasy art versus some I know are more anime or more comic or whatever?
That'll be
Well,
more of that's all Bruce. So my answer is short. I'll get out of the way. I do three, and sometimes I do two, and not three, like this year. And Bruce is more the convention guy.
Yeah, I do 14, somewhere around there, 14 per
Oh.
year, but they're not all conventions in the typical sense. Like I do kind of stress the fact that like a good share these days are like magic competitions, and they usually have some guest artists on the side. And those are much easier, much more restful than like a Comic-Con because at Comic-Con you're kind of like a carnival barker trying to
Yeah.
attract people to just even look at your work as they wander past quickly. And that's kind of like what you have to do to survive and thrive at that kind of event. Whereas a magic event, it's like, okay, these people, they have product like a ton of them in the room at any given time have product that you've done the art for just ready to be signed. Like they have it on hand. A lot of them have looked up who the artists are going to be, who are going to be there, so they know which cards of yours they have. They've got them all ready to sign. They just come over and get them signed and see what else you've got. So you've got a ready-made demographic for you. And so mostly I'm just sitting and signing cards and selling things here and there. It's a very easy gig compared to the other one. So that makes it doable to do as many events as I do. And they completely range in scale because like, I've even just been a guest at like local game stores and stuff and can make a decent amount of money just having an appearance at like a pre-order, a pre-release type event sometimes. So it could be anything from just like sitting down at a table at a local game store all the way up to like a Gen Con or Dragon Con where they're just massive, massive events and completely draining and tiring, but monetarily very worth it.
And
Absolutely.
on the note of the ones that are more welcoming to fantasy artists, we actually, on the episode that I need to put out this week but haven't done, we have a rant about which conventions we enjoy. But usually it's the ones that aren't super corporate, because those seem to lean more in favor of fan artists, I think. It's sort of what
Sure.
they want on the floor. Places
It's what
like,
they expect,
yeah.
maybe. Like, right now we're in this period where there's consolidation in the convention industry. You've got at least two or three main companies that are trying to buy up every con that they can. Like I think the biggest ones being ReedPop and Fan Expo. And at both companies, like it's not that they don't like us being there, but they really don't necessarily have their eye on fantasy art and what's big, what's going to draw crowds. At best, they know who the big names are in comics, maybe, but like almost none of those shows really seem to have their eye on what we do, and um, a lot of people were coming up to our my booth at Emerald City and saying how nice it would be if ReedPop actually had a list or a way to search even by keyword and find out where the magic artists were in that giant room. They would have appreciated a lot, but ReedPop has no clue, despite the fact that they operate Magic Cons for Wizards of the Coast. Um, but maybe it's a situation of the right hand not speaking to the left hand on that one.
Yeah.
And so as they consolidate, they do become more corporate and a little bit, I don't know, just not as nice to deal with in many respects, just kind of cold.
Oh yeah, very cold. I got it wrong on our show, but I went to a Fan X is starting to buy some too. Not to be confused with Fan Expo, which I did.
Hmm.
And the one in India, I don't know how your experience was, Susan. I don't know how often you've gone to Indiana. I didn't know they were bought out by Fan X.
I didn't
And
know till
the
this year either, but I live in Indiana, so I go every year.
Yeah, and remembered that. I just didn't know if you went every year. And then that was the worst load in I've ever done for a convention in my entire life. I sat in that line for 2 hours.
I'm a local. I should have informed you. Is like you don't wait in that line, or yeah, you'll be miserable sitting there for 2 hours. What you do is there's the parking lot right behind it that there's a tunnel that leads right up to the load-in dock. So you just spend the $20 or whatever, save yourself a couple hours, and just park and load in from there.
Yeah, we were told before we got in the line that they had parking for us, and then by the time we got up there, uh, apparently all the spots were gone, or so it was very confusing. I thought that parking lot was for exhibitors,
It'd
and
be
it was
nice.
not. So
Yeah, it should be. A lot of things should be when it comes to that convention, but I don't want to bitch too much. But like in the beginning, the numbers used to be really, really good there. And then it started focusing more on, well, as my buddy Billy likes to call them celebrity petting zoos. It kind of
Mm,
evolved into that.
yep.
And so I know me and Jacob and Phil and a couple other fantasy artists did one year and like we all did not do well. And we're like, we're not going to do this again. But then we came back last year because we all just have so much fun. We're like, well, we'll just consider it a hangout and at least maybe we'll make our money back. And so it was a little better that year. And then this year was a little better than that. So it seems to be gaining steam again as far as the art goes.
that's interesting. Yeah, I on the side of people being cold, I don't think I saw a single person who worked for this show the entire time. But on the side of profit, it was a bad show. I think I would return when I have a little bit more diversity other than prints to sell, because there's not a collector base there, right? So.
Yeah, not really. But although we do Gen Con there, but most of the people that are coming, like he mentioned, that they don't really know that we're there. We're
Mhm.
just Artist Alley, and it's, off to the side. The con focus online more like if they do talk about any artist, it's going to be the comic book artists.
Right.
And so other than that, they're just pushing the celebrities and everything. So people who might come to the convention to see us might not have an idea that we're there unless they follow us on our personal socials. So that's kind of rough. But luckily, being a local, I have a lot of people that collect my work. And so they know that they can come find me at Indiana Comic Con. So that's how it's still a good convention for me. But yeah, if I didn't live here and I didn't have my local following, I don't know if I would do it. So yeah, well, you mentioning the print thing, I know I need to diversify the merch that I have. And I was wondering, Bruce, you do playmats, and I saw on your
Hmm.
website you also have t-shirts and stuff like that. Are you seeing that anything is selling better than another, or any suggestions there?
I mean, playmats do well for me primarily because my work is sort of in that gamer adjacent area, like obviously like a lot of Magic work, D&D work, and Slay the Spire, and like all of those things sort of combined, right? It's an overlap with gamer lifestyles, so I have an advantage in terms of selling that type of product. I've just started trying to do t-shirts via dropship because I don't want to have a ton of apparel filling up my booth. And so far, it actually has not been going very well. Like I do field a lot of interest. People, say they're interested in it, but because it's, like it's a QR code to my website, and they have to go through those additional steps, it doesn't really lead to a lot of additional sales. People who go to the trouble of having apparel available on site probably do sell a lot more than I do, but I'm constantly trying to like um, figure out like how much room I've actually got at my booth, and where I'm going to put stuff, and just even how to bring stuff to a con when you're located in Seattle and therefore most of your conventions are a plane ride away.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit too much to be able to bring a ton of different types of merch and have it on hand, unfortunately.
We were talking about that on our show that, obviously you can sort of min-max everything, but I remember at Dragon Con, we were the first two people out of the door. and probably the
Hmm.
first two people set up too, if we were to time it, because we
Right.
try and keep both of us try and keep our setup to where we're not sweating bullets by the end of putting it up, you know. Um, there is
Yeah.
an effort to the things that you can bring and diversify. So I think I'm trying to balance that. I'm trying to get that going.
Yeah,
But
I'm always thinking of return on effort when I'm
mm,
thinking about conventions because that's the only way that you can do a ton of conventions like I do, right? Is by actually thinking about, okay, how efficient is it going to be for me to set up and take down? Because the less efficient it is and the more finicky and difficult it is, the less I'm going to want to do those events, the less willing I'm going to be to try new events. So I am managing my own energy levels, especially as I get older and don't necessarily have the strength and energy that I might have had, even 5, 10 years ago. Um, so yeah, it's
we
it's all management of that.
we were talking about someone I saw doing this really well. I don't know if you saw Tim Vaughn at Indiana. He was actually sort of close to the back by the back wall,
I
and
love his.
but he's trying to diversify, and I think he's doing it really well because
Yeah.
everything that he's diversified on his table is just like a small chest of coins, a book, some cards. It's everything that you can just have out as a display, and they're small. And
Yeah, that
yeah,
is really smart. And I need to look more because I even bought one of his journals. I just think they're absolutely
Hmm.
gorgeous. But yeah, all of it is really small and will pack up well and ship well. And absolutely.
the
I
guy's a marketing genius. I don't know what it is. Simple, good,
you just
clean.
glance and you know it's his product. That's his
Hmm.
artwork, So to be so instantly recognizable, I mean, he's nailed it. Do either one of you have like passive income streams? Do you have work in brick and mortars, or do you have like a print shop that sells your work, just to where you get the checks?
I tend to think that passive income is usually not nearly as passive
Right.
as as you'd like it to be or as anyone wants to imagine it to be. Like, I've tried places like what is the print site imprint or whatever.
Imprint.
Like I haven't had good luck with those. And like
Yeah.
I said, the print on demand shirts haven't really been selling like hotcakes either. And so I think the tendency actually is so-called passive income actually takes a lot of non-passive effort to set up properly. Like someone's putting in the time, and so either you're giving up all of your profit margin to someone else to put in the time, or you're actually putting in a lot of time yourself. Like the closest I get to passive income is, of course, I have a shop on my website, and orders come in, and I get a very good amount of money in through that every year, and it's not exactly passive, but it's not. I've got it down to a science where it's not too much effort either.
I was hoping one of you guys would have some magical new print website for me or something because I've been selling my artwork in a metaphysical shop in a town, couple towns over, and it was like a check just come in the mail every month,
Hmm.
and it made me very happy. But they just closed.
No.
Oh,
I'm like, I can't.
does work if your work was selling in an environment like that,
I need to find more
you should
metaphysical
do
shop.
another one because very rarely that happens. I've known so many artists who try that. I live in a smaller town and it doesn't work at all.
It's hard to find a lot of witchy shops in the Midwest, though. So I've got my work cut out for me.
Oh,
Yeah,
they do exist. I mean, you just need to scout out some college towns and some
Yeah.
things like that. Go up and see what Ann Arbor has to offer and the that sort of a place, right? Like I'm sure they do exist. And people in an environment starved for that kind of content, are probably going to be even more appreciative of it, I'd think.
yeah. The closer you can get to the niche there, and so. But you know all this. I don't know.
Oh no, I'm
I
always
don't.
happy to take advice, absolutely. But I kind of realized more and more as the years have passed that kind of like witchy people are my people, the whole
Hmm.
Yeah.
nature and that kind of vibe.
Yeah, because I
I've
can say like my mom and her friends were witchy Midwesterners. That would be totally up their alley, and they were definitely like, wherever they were going around, traveling for camping or whatever, they were always on, keeping an eye out for that kind of stuff. So I'm sure they're not the only ones.
As far as passive income, anytime I talk about income with artists, I always ask if they've gotten interested in the stock market yet, because that's
I
outside
love
of my web shop, that's always my tip because most of us work from home
that.
and we have a circumstance where we can sort of watch the market all day if we need to. And I was day trading for a while. Now I'm doing long form trading, and it's not as hard as you think.
Yeah, I'm going to have to ask you some questions because I have been looking more into finding out how to make my finances work better for me. And I know there are ways and I just need to learn it.
Yeah, the only thing with the market or watching it over the course of time is that you have to also have the lack of anxiety is
I get that.
so,
Oh, I am curious because we've been hinting around a lot. We've talked about conventions, a little bit of online sales. What would you say when you look at, here's what I made this year? How much do you think is like conventions? How much do you think is online sales or freelance work? How does that kind of break down for you? Either one of
I looked at this recently, and let's see. So my main income streams are, or I guess the ones that I've delineated are conventions and online sales, freelance, and then Patreon. And Patreon is a very tiny part of the whole, something like maybe like 1% of it or whatever. Um, Conventions and freelance were each, oh, let's see, they were each maybe like um, something like 40% of the total income, something like that. So half and half, and then the remainder was web sales. But of course it also like there's a large portion of secondary market income when it comes to something like Wizards of the Coast, D&D and Magic stuff. So, with Magic we receive artist proofs, and those copies of the card feed into my online sales in a big way, and they feed into my convention sales in a big way because they're free product. So there's no cost involved.
Yeah.
They're lightweight because they're just cards, and they're limited edition, so they're high value, right? So that's just, that feeds into all of that basically.
yeah, there was a Gen Con where we made years ago where we essentially made the same number, and I was excited because I was still I was still getting back into conventions,
Hmm.
and then after you had gotten the magic work, you had more than doubled me by the
Yeah.
next year.
Yeah.
So
It
it's
exploded
definitely
very quickly.
yeah, you're which is great, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Although it is also dependent on which cards you get, whether they're good cards, things that people are excited about, and because something like that's a limited edition item, once it's gone, it's gone. And so that uh, sales and income bump that you saw from those particular things, that's going to only last as long as you still have them around. So I definitely noticed from year to year, like my best Gen Con was definitely buoyed by the fact that I had my first round of APs, and I had a bunch of good cards in there. And then the next year, not nearly as good, again, because I had sold through them.
oh, man. Well, you briefly mentioned Patreon. I was going to ask you guys about that. It seemed like a few years ago, everybody was pushing their Patreons
Mm.
hard, and yeah, but it seems like it's quieted down. So, do you both still have them? Do you mail out rewards? And I know I'm not as active with mine as I should be.
Sure. That's probably the common story from a lot of people. I've definitely eased back on the gas on Patreon as far as how I'm advertising it to people at conventions or whatnot. I Part of that is because I do feel bad because I've been so busy between conventions and the freelance work itself that it's hard to give much attention to it. But I do keep it alive because it is a reminder to get back and do that personal work back there. I mean, I worked on that through my Patreon, and it was kind of like, a reminder to keep working both the pieces that you mentioned, Susan, were essentially for Patreon. And if I hadn't had that kind of constant reminder, okay, I need to have something to show my patrons each month, who knows, maybe I wouldn't have finished that series of pieces. So it is a good thing to have on the side. It's just a such a tiny part of the overall business that it's also hard to give it maybe the attention that it deserves sometimes.
Guilt is a powerful tool. I know it makes me feel bad. I'm like, well, I haven't given them anything. So then, yeah, I put in the work.
Hmm.
Yeah. How about you, Alan?
I haven't really ever done anything with Patreon. I started one up, like you said, when everyone else was sort of doing that. And even as my work has gotten better and I've gotten more followers and collectors, by the time I had gotten to a point where I felt I could expand it, I was doing so much, just like Bruce, NDA work that it's difficult to really share. I've had a lot of dreams about getting the personal work machine going, or even offering uh, instructional videos or mentorships like Bruce is doing. And I've dipped my toe in there a bit, and it's been pretty successful, but I still just have not gotten the Patreon going. It's there. You can go and support me, but I haven't posted anything in years.
Nice. All
So
right. Well, do you guys have any nuggets of wisdom for people that want to do what you want to do, or numerous nuggets of wisdom?
Yeah, I feel, yeah, boy, there's so much, and I think everything has gotten so hard these days. Again, with AI flooding the market and taking some of those bottom rung clients off the roster. As much as we're at the point where like, we didn't want to be bothered by those guys anyway. Early in my career, I did depend on that for income.
yeah,
I think at this point, to counteract that, you really want to get out there and meet people in person as much as possible, like doing conventions, even just attending conventions to interact with the artists who are there and, show them your stuff, leave them a business card, follow up after, which is what a lot of people don't tend to do when they actually have time to really look at your portfolio and respond to you. Um, but like be a human being for them. Like lean into your humanity. That's what we have to do at this point. Like you have to establish a certain level of trust with art directors, with other artists out there, and all the rest. If you're just kind of like a faceless handle out on the internet, I don't think that's going to fly as far anymore just because there's a lot of grifters hiding behind AI content, and people aren't going to be as trusting of what they see. So you need to put a face on your work.
I'd agree with that. That was the first part of my career, is meeting up with other artists, sort of like what we're doing right now. And at the time, of course, they were much bigger artists. And for me, because I was just getting started, and having, like, Bruce thinks I'm crazy, but I would just call artists or email people that I thought were famous, and then be surprised when they wrote back. So I'm like, well, let me keep doing this, and that got me so much in life. But if I had any advice, and this is something that took me so long to learn, and a lot of people can't do it because, like you said, when you're getting started, you're just trying to pay the bills out of school or something. Um, paint, paint things that you want to paint. And it sounds so simple, but it's so difficult because you feel
Mm.
like you've got to paint an
What other
elf in a,
people want.
yeah,
Yeah.
an elf in a cool pose for a character portrait to get hired by D&D. But like my interest in my work has never been higher than when I purely did personal work. And so that's why I'm moving in that direction. The interactions you have with people completely change from this is a cool painting to having a woman recently tear up in front of my artwork. It is so mind-bogglingly different if you haven't experienced it.
Yeah. Likewise with those personal
Yeah.
pieces back there, like you see people like, oh my God, like they just have the full emotional reaction.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it feeds into like those personal pieces feed into getting clients like Wizards of the Coast. Like they
It
see
does.
what you're doing that's personal, that really touches on things, and that's what they want you to do for them, or at least to have a touch of that in, even if you are doing an elf in a cool pose for them in the end, like they want a touch of you to bring your personal to that, if at all possible, to make that resonate beyond what it is and kind of punch above its weight as an image. And kind of along these lines, one thing I always tell people is focus on the art that you love to make, not necessarily what you love to consume.
Mm.
Because we are taught to be good consumers, especially in this country, and a lot of our mentality, even if we're not thinking about it like at a surface level, is sort of connected to that. And like, oh, I loved watching this thing, playing this thing, reading this thing. And we get so caught up in like, okay, well, if I want to do art for that thing that I loved consuming, then I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to back myself into this corner, this niche that's not quite, not quite what I actually do,
Yeah.
and the art doesn't come off as being as honest and the results aren't as great. And ironically, that is possibly a good way to um, not be able to do work for the clients and the products that you love, because you have watered down what you do to such a degree.
It's true, and we see it over and over and over and over again. And it's it's the advice I'll give until the day I die, because I doubt that mentality is going anywhere. It's such an easy trap to fall into. I
Yeah.
fell into it. Someone else is going to fall into it.
Yeah.
But the faster you get out of that cycle of defeat, where you're trying your hardest but nothing's coming out of it, the better.
Hmm.
No, that absolutely rings true. I just made me think of Peace of Mind that's going to be in the next, well, the one that just came out, Infected by Art, my Mother Nature piece, which I just love working on. I just the organic lines and the forms and the tree limbs,
Hmm.
and I can just get lost in it, and it just makes me happy to work on it. And I got one of those amazing compliments from a random woman. She's like, "I just like the way it makes me feel, and it's
Hmm.
my own personal piece." So yes, I always feel like if it's something that if you love it, other people are going to sense that and it's going to come through the art. Yeah, when you're trying to create something for a certain job or for a certain look, it's going to it's going to lack that organic nature
It's
that comes through whenever you're in that
Hmm.
moment.
it sounds so deceptively simple, right? And we like it's something you might hear at maybe a modern abstract school, paint what's in your heart.
Yeah.
And it's or I guess closer to what Bruce said, what you enjoy, and the it's I don't know.
Yeah.
It sounds so simple, but it's so
But
powerful.
people, yeah, people don't follow that
They
advice
don't follow it.
barely ever when they're starting out, and
Yeah.
sometimes you have to get through the school of hard knocks before you really internalize the fact that it's like, okay, if life's going to be this hard and an art career is going to be this hard, I might as well do the stuff that I actually love doing.
Well, you mentioning the word school, that makes me think of another question I wanted to ask you. We're talking about how socializing and everything is so important in this industry. Those master classes and like fantastic workshops and all this kind of stuff, they're expensive. So that's really difficult when planning, but do you think that they're worth it as far as what they can do for your career with networking and growing your skills?
Yes. I think that, I always tell people that yes, like something like Smarter Art School, for example, is very expensive to afford, but I don't know of any other program anywhere that has the track record that they do of getting artists into stuff like Wizards of the Coast, Magic, D&D, all of that. Like they have an incredible track record in part because they usually have guest art directors from those companies, as part of their course. So you are getting on the map, on the radar of the people that you would want to know your work, and you're getting advice and feedback and small group, mentality of artists, also your peers helping each other out, like, meeting uh Alan via that, right? That's kind of paid off well and into a friendship and all the rest of that, a podcast now. So there's a lot of value to it, and it's beyond even like what they're advertising of like the mentorship or whatever,
Yeah.
um, that can pay off. The way that I viewed it when I did it was that this is the equivalent of taking a master's degree, except in a way that's actually possibly going to pay off.
Yeah.
Because a brick and mortar school master's degree is often a pretty worthless thing in many respects. It's not geared towards the career that we're in as illustrators at all. So I viewed it as okay, like I'm not going to have a fancy piece of paper to say this, but I'm going to construct a master level series of courses with industry titans and people who know what they're talking about, who are working in the industry that they are teaching towards. And I'm going to assemble that. And at least in my case, it paid off that way. And, I think it's justifiable as like I could pay tens of thousands of dollars for a master's degree at a brick and mortar school that's not going to do anything for my career, or I could pay thousands of dollars for some online classes with some of the best illustrators working and alive today, and maybe it'll get me some traction. And it did.
Yeah, I don't have anything against master's programs, but at the end of the day, well, I guess I kind of do, but at the end of the day, you have to realize that those people are teaching at a school and they're not masters of their career,
They're
right?
not in it. Yeah. In
Um,
most cases, not all
but
cases, maybe, but
on
most.
on that note, you and I both have mentors. I think you still have a mentor, right?
Yes.
Aw.
So,
I have a mentor and I have mentees.
yeah.
So the goal is to have a kind of chain of information that keeps valuable insights alive. I essentially have a secondary art director when I can call on him. So I'm continuing to do mentorship with Ron Lemon, and he's been great.
Ooh, very cool.
And basically giving me feedback at all the things, because Ron is like he's all about tools, and he's interested in all the tools. So I can, if I have a question about Blender, he can go down a deep dive on that. If I have a question about painting oils or acrylics, he can also handle that. Do a deep dive, just as deep either way. So that's incredibly helpful.
It's so helpful to have somebody to look at your work at literally any stage. I mean, I know, for instance, that somebody like Donato is in an email chain where he often sends his work for critique from his peers. Um, but yeah, having anybody that's willing to give you a paint over, even if you have to pay for it, is
Yeah.
is I think essential to grow.
I've got my little friend group and in our little industry professional
Hmm.
group here, and I'll get a piece, and sometimes I'm nervous about it, but I know I always have to send it to them, and whether I want to take their advice or not, 99% of the time I do. It always makes my piece better. So I
Hmm.
I crave getting other eyes on my work because they're going to see stuff that we don't. We
And
get
even if they say something that you disagree with, it usually clarifies
Mhm.
what your understanding of what your own intent was, because you have to justify it at that point. You're like, okay, I don't really want to take this advice, but why?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not
Yeah.
quite doing what I'm trying to do, and then you have to figure out what you're really trying to do.
Absolutely. Well, I have a question for you that is not art related. I am curious, you as people, what is something do you think that everybody might be surprised to know about you? Like, are you an avid Beanie Baby collector? Do you have like a black belt in karate or something?
Hmm. Um,
Surprised.
I guess as hobbies go, my hobby is sort of economics and geopolitics and stuff like that. So
Ooh, wild man.
I'm always staying well read on those kinds of topics. It's nothing to do with art, but it also does end up informing my art because the systems that underlie everything in terms of economics and stuff do have an effect on patterns of development and stuff. So when I'm doing world building and I am, fleshing out where these towns and cities are and how they would grow, like it does impact it. So having interests outside of art, sometimes way, way, way outside of art, still feeds back into it.
Yeah. Alan,
I'm a, I don't know, something surprising. I'm an open book most of the time.
have you ever
I'm
gone skydiving? Do you, dream of one day owning your own island? I don't know. Just,
I'm obsessed with my lawn.
oh yeah.
It's
It's true, he
it's
is.
like I could tell you that I'm obsessed with history, which is also true, but it's not surprising. But my lawn is like my child.
That. So like the seeding of it and all that kind of stuff. Do you do the flowers
I
too? Full landscape?
Yeah, I do landscaping. I don't make it look like a golf course. I can, but that takes a lot more money than you think it does. So I have it just below that grade, and I try and keep it as manicured as I can.
Oh, and I just earlier you said your favorite thing to paint is the grass and the rocks. So there's your love coming into your art.
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, unless you guys have some last little bits of, anything you want to throw in, I do need to know what socials do you want me to send people to? What are your websites?
Sure. Mine is brucebrenneise.com. I don't know if people are going to have an easy time with that. I don't know if my name's up here or not. I guess it'll be in
It
the
is, and I'll
links
put
and
it on there
stuff.
too.
Okay. So the hardest part's always my last name because no one knows how to spell or pronounce it, except you did perfectly fine at the top of the show.
Thank you.
So that's the main one. As far as socials, I'm mostly sharing art on Blue Sky these days. I'm at Bruce Draws over there.
I've been so bad with Blue Sky. I have it. I've done a couple, but I just keep forgetting about it, honestly. There's just too many.
Well, that is true, but most of the other social platforms are actively harvesting
That's true.
any imagery that you put on there. So
The devil.
that's why I'm putting a little bit more of my energy into that one versus the others these days.
Very valid. Alan?
I'm Alan Morris Art, wherever you want to find me, and alanmorrisart.com. And I am also barely posting on Blue Sky.
We need to get better about that. But
I prod him all the time about that stuff.
I've been posting
You
on
have,
everything
you
else
have.
except for Blue Sky because I haven't gotten a lot of traction on there, but I still need to keep up with it.
It's
I
a
You
had
were an
snowball.
early adopter. You
Yeah, it's
enjoyed
it's a
some of my
it's a
reviews.
snowball. Yeah, it's a
Oh,
snowball, and you get it to a certain point where it kind of gives you some feedback, and you're like, okay, I can put some of my energy into this. But those first few years on almost any social media can be really rough.
do the
and
hashtags help? And are there any tips for Blue Sky?
They do. Hashtags are actually operational there, whereas I think most of the other social media have kind of been deprecating them. So yeah, that and the fact that the feed is not algorithm based means that people are only going to see your stuff if you're actually like when you post it or when you repost it. Or also I think it gets bumped up when you like comment on it. So typically I'll post and then I will comment on my own piece later, like later in the day, with, additional information about the piece, like just a fun fact or whatever.
Right.
And that way, earlier in the day, I get the American crowd. Later the day, when it gets rebumped, maybe that's more like the Asia and Europe crowd, and, might help.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate any tip on there. I need to get better about that for sure.
And if you enjoyed this content, you can check out our interview where we interviewed Susan on our podcast, Hanging Out podcast. So the name's not as cool, but
Oh.
and it's a lot less formal. But that's sort of the point. Yeah, if you're an artist, you could check it out because
Who
everyone
do you
else
have
would
on
be
next?
interested.
Who do you have on next on your podcast?
We don't know.
Ourselves.
Oh yeah, we're coming up. We
We
we we're
we
too busy.
we just had a conversation. Alan was just like, let's just chit chat about our recent cons and stuff. So that's the next one coming up. And we haven't figured out who our next guest after that's going to be, but we know a lot of cool people, so I'm sure we'll come up with something.
Yeah, I've got one. Well, I don't have it on the calendar yet, but one planned. I'm going to do we're calling them con postmortem, where
Hmm.
we're going to, yeah, talk about them after the fact. And so we've got a few Indiana cons we're going to break
Ba
down a few of their
Basically what
cons.
we did.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Good information. So I'll be looking forward to checking out yours because you guys did different other than Indiana Comic Con, you did different conventions than we did. So then we can kind of
Right. Yeah.
so well, I
You
can't
can
thank
hear
you
me
both.
complain about Indiana.
I won't take it personally. It's fine. But I can't thank you both enough for coming on, and this has been awesome.
Our
So
pleasure.
it's
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Hey,
You
you too.
too.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.